At the edge of an international border, at the edge of the Pacific, at the edge of innovation, community, education, and discovery, you're listening to At the Edge of It All, a University of San Diego podcast where USD experts speak on topics and stories that impact you and the broader community.
Hi there, I'm Melissa Martinez.
And I'm Elena Gomez, and with us today we have Maritza Johnson. She is the founding director of the Center for Digital Civil Society. Maritza, thanks for being with us.
Hey, yeah, thank you so much for having me. Super excited for our conversation.
Yes, excited to dive in. So you work for the Center for Digital Civil Society here at USD. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do there.
So at our center, the main thing that we're interested in is that we're, I think like everybody else, really excited about the power and promise of data that we see for society. There's a huge amount of excitement, I think, right now in terms of what are we going to be doing in terms of scientific advances in basically every field. Now that we have bigger hard drives, we have more connectivity, we have more data. We're all walking around with smartphones, and we're it's staggering just how many data points are being collected at any given moment in time right now. And scientists and researchers are increasingly finding ways to use that data and find new insights. And the whole thing with the center, and I know that the name can sound a little bit lofty, like Digital Civil Society. What does this mean?
Right.
And the name is intentional to call out that at this point we're all digital citizens, particularly in San Diego. We are all parts of a very digitized world, and kind of in the shadow of this excitement and the promise and power of data, I think is also a second side of there could be downsides here.
Many,
right. And that's to me what the center is about. It's being sure that we are, as individuals, finding our place in the conversation, so it doesn't feel like when I chat with people these days, it sounds like there's a feeling of sort of resignation or concern about AI is here, artificial intelligence is here, the machines are taking over. What are we going to do? It's like the big tech companies have so much data about us. What can we even do anymore? And the center is all about it's not too late. All these things, they don't actually even work the way that they're being advertised. And let's find our voice and have a place in that conversation. So it's for students, it's for community members, it's for people who are working at these tech companies, really giving space to all of us having a place in that conversation.
And how does it make sense to have the center within the Shiley Marcus School of Engineering?
Yeah, so this is something that so the center is nearly 2 years old now, and we've always wanted to position this as, it is a center that is sort of a brainchild of the School of Engineering, but it's for all of campus. And with, I think, so my background is in computer science. Actually, I did my undergrad here at USD. That's where I first got really interested and excited about computing. And computer science is all about, it's the study of what is computable. What can you do with computers? And so as data really started to enter into the conversation and really change how we're doing computing, I think computer scientists really felt like they owned that conversation, which to me is a little bit. You can own a piece, but you don't get to have all of it.
Not the whole pie.
Right, you can't have the whole pie. If we want, I think, as computer scientists, we want it to be a big, exciting thing, and that means we need to open up the conversation for everybody. Right. So even though we're getting started from the School of Engineering, we're serving all of campus. We're bringing in new classes and coursework and events for all of campus. Just this summer, we had a group of interns working on a project we call Data Curious, and I'm actually quite proud of our 4 interns we had. We represented, we had marketing, communications, industrial engineering, and the School of Business. So to me, that's an example of we're bringing this conversation outside of engineering, saying everybody has a place.
Because I think everything is so interconnected now, especially when you talk about security and technology, right?
Definitely.
What would be sort of the perfect world for you as far as data? I mean, you mentioned that there's data points hitting us at all points where they're kind of collecting data and trying to make it so maybe are we more educated on where our data is going? Or what would you say is a perfect world for you as someone who works in a sphere for people's security and privacy with technology?
Right. It's such a good question. Okay, so I have to say, I'm not I'm not a privacy fundamentalist. So there are some folks who work in the space where you get this label as a privacy fundamentalist, which is, any amount of data collection is bad. Any amount of use of data is bad. You don't, it's like, and I feel like that kind of goes with this vibe of like, privacy is just secrecy. It's like you want to be totally isolated and you want total control over every bit of data. And that's not what my work is about. My work is about like, we have really exciting tools. Data really is quite powerful. There's so much interesting stuff you could do with it. So then how do we have, like, I would love it if everybody had the knowledge and agency to make their decisions on their own. And I think that's the piece that's missing. Like, we don't have a base level of data literacy so that people could kind of just decide for themselves what's right or like what fits your life. What are your goals? And then how do you use information about the way that technology is developed so you can decide, do I want to have this home pod in my kitchen? Do I, and it's a trade-off, right? It's like, do I value being able to say, hey, Siri, play this album? Or do I want to walk over and do it manually so that I'm not, basically having, so I don't have a microphone listening to me when I'm talking. I'm not risking it accidentally turning on. And so it's the decision-making that is important to me. And I feel like that, we have so much work to do in terms of how do you have enough information so you can decide for yourself what's right.
And do you feel like the system is sort of set up that way in terms of, most of us don't know. I mean, I include myself. Like, I don't know what I'm clicking into a lot of the times. I don't know what I'm allowing when I have this app or when I use this thing. Do you think the system is set up that way for a purpose?
Yeah, it's a good question. And my immediate response is, well, the system hasn't been set up or designed in a way that would make this easy. And okay, so I flew here yesterday and I was reading this book. It's called To Engineer is Human. And I think one of the things that's easy to overlook with all the technology that we live with is that it was designed and built by humans. So everything that you touch that is technology is the result of a bunch of decisions that somebody made. And so, is technology set up this way? Not necessarily. Like, I don't think that anybody really sat down and thought, like, technology would be better if people had no idea how their data was flowing through. It just wasn't a priority. I think that from, like, I was about to say the long arc of technology, and it's not even that long that we've had computers and everything in our life. But for the past, like, let's say 80 years, moving from computers, which were really a thing that like the government had,
right,
that big companies had, this kind of like trend of personal computing, it's probably like the mid 90s when people started to have like a Windows machine in their home office.
You've got mail. I remember that.
Right?
Those were the days.
And it was a really different, like it felt like an innocent time. And then now we all have like smartphones that you carry with you every moment of every day, right? Yeah. And it's just totally different. So then this move from, computers were something that you could walk away from because they're literally so big and in a storage closet type thing,
right,
to now we carry them on ourselves. They're really personal. And I feel like sometimes, like I've worked at a good number of kind of like the big tech companies that you might have heard of, and it's to engineers to human, they're humans making these decisions. And when you're thinking about building new features, it's kind of easy to build the new next sexy thing and forget to build the safeguards or forget to build in, well, like, what do people really need to make this their own?
Is this where we touch on when we say that, your expertise are really in human-centered security and privacy and what that really means?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm just going to unpack that a little bit. So as I said, I'm a computer scientist by training. And at some point, I got really interested in this subfield of it called human-computer interaction. And so computer science in its purest sense is the study of what's computable. What are the kind of theoretical limits of what you can do with a computer? And we do have, we have kind of laws and maxims about how we understand that and what's possible. And then human-computer interaction is at the interface between people and their use of computers. If we think about computers as a tool, how do we kind of design and build so that people can use them to, the greatest effect? The thing that you're really looking for in human-computer interaction is, can your target population correctly, efficiently, and with satisfaction achieve their goals. So it's kind of funny. So I was just thinking about like a smartphone. So a smartphone, it came about as being a mobile phone that you could take with you. And I feel like lately people joke, it's like
a computer you can take with you.
Yes, it's right? And then and it's so freaking hard to make a phone call.
Right.
It's like this, it's like, where's that dialer? Like, and like you see people walking down the street, like holding their phone out.
Well,
and it's
isn't it funny how you can do so many things on it, but when a call, I don't know if it happens to you, but when a call comes up and you have these two choices, like my mind scrambles. I'm like, what do I do? Do I pick it up? Do I not?
Also, why are they calling me? Right? Why can't they just text me?
Yes. Yeah. And so it's like these things are shifting, and they're, how are you designing it and how are people using it? And one of the neat things about this field is that to answer this question of, how do you make it so somebody can use it correctly and efficiently and with joy, you have to go out and talk to people. So like a lot of my work, when I worked in industry, I worked at Google, and there I worked as a user experience researcher. And a lot of my time was spent designing surveys, asking people what they thought or felt about certain products, designing in-person interviews. Actually, one time in Vegas, I was in the airport and I had like printed out screen mocks of a new design. And I was like, hey, do you want to can I talk with you a little bit about this new design that we're thinking about? And I'll give you a little Starbucks gift card if you can answer these questions about what would you do if you had this this notification pop up on your phone right now? And so it's, you can't do my job, a lot of it has been, I can't do it without asking people what they think.
Right.
It's like, what are you doing when you want this feature? What are your goals when you want to interact with this product that we are designing for you? And it's a little bit of a it's an iterative kind of walking toward what you hope is a better product that helps people.
Well, I've always been so amazed when I've seen some of those movies that have come out recently talking about the tech world and how things were created and how people work with it. Just the level of research that is done to be able to say, I know that based on my research and what we've seen before, this person is going to look at this type of stuff, right? Just the level of information that they have collected from people is astonishing to me because it works.
Yes. Yeah. And see, I feel like that's a key area where this conversation about how is your data being collected and used and how does it affect product teams' decision making. So a lot of the process that gets the product team to be able to say it works is based off of a thing called A/B testing.
Right.
And this has been like a hugely powerful tool for websites and mobile apps and technology teams to figure out what are people, what is it that people are actually doing when they see these different notifications. Because it's one thing, like I just joked a few minutes ago about being in person and showing somebody new mocks and saying, how would you respond if you saw this notification? So it's one thing to ask somebody what they would do. And then usually you get different results if you actually have instrumented and measured what they do in the real app.
Right.
So I think there's, the self-reported data, we're often quite generous to ourselves in terms of what we think we're going to do and how we'll respond. And then when you actually get it, when you're, busy with something else, and like you said, you're kind of panicking, do I pick up this call? Do I not? Do I keep doing what I'm doing? A lot of the times, if you're busy, you're kind of like, okay, later.
Correct.
And then later never comes.
Right. No, it's astonishing. But what is more astonishing to me, and it goes back to the human-centered aspect of security and privacy, is that in a lot of those documentaries that I have seen, even the people in charge of creating that fall prey to the same thing, right? It's all about the psychology and how people are wired and how this industry has been able to exploit that too.
It's true. I feel like sometimes I joke with my students and interns. I'm like, human's gonna human. Like it's just.
I think we need a shirt like that.
Right?
Human's gonna human.
Like, I'm sorry. At the end of the day.
Right.
So is it one of those things then? If we all have those phones in our pocket, we're all using the technology, we all have, the ring light and all of these things. Is it one of those things where you think that, okay, well, if you're using the technology and you want the technology and you're saying, people are designing it for you, where is sort of the line though of the technology being used for your good? And also, are we even looking on the other side of what is my what does a cell phone in my pocket actually mean? You said, data tracking, the ring light has surveillance. Where sort of is that line, I guess? Or do you think there is a line? Like if we have a phone, then you kind of sign up for it? Or where do you see that?
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like I've spent my whole career wanting to push back on this idea that like, if you use it, that means you're giving permission.
Right.
So, I've worked at it. Actually, I've been parts of product teams where I think people kind of assume it's like, well, if you've installed this app, then you've implicitly agreed to anything we might want to do and experiment with inside this app.
Right.
I'm like, that is definitely not true. Like that is a self-serving myth that we all need to overcome here. And I feel like it's true too. I guess, there are so many levels to it. And like, to me, part of it is with some of the new technologies that we have, or rather, like I feel like some of those attitudes I think come from this idea that people are, it's almost like a falsehood that people are in a position to make rational decisions about the technology in their lives. And then from the work of the center and from my work experience, I always really want to bring in this point that, people don't have access to there's a huge information asymmetry in terms of the data that's being collected and how it's used and where it's going, to where I don't think that we can fairly say that people have access to the information to a point where they're able to make rational decisions. And then that even sets aside kind of, this joke of like humans going to human. That's applied to me on all of the research that we've seen in behavioral economics and cognitive science, where people aren't strictly rational like you kind of, I guess, like economists would hope and want them to be.
Right.
So, have we all signed up for this? I feel like, okay, and then here's where I go back into like a lot of my computer science thinking too, and, tech industry. Things have changed so quickly. I'm not sure that any one person really has a grasp on everything that's happening right now.
Right.
This was not a series of conscious decisions toward a particular objective where, we've reached an end state. I feel like it's a series of sort of discovering and building the artificial, and at some point you get to a point and you're like, ooh. And then here's where I almost pull into like a Hollywood trope. It's like, uh-oh, what have we built? Like, oh, we forgot, we built a car, we forgot to build in like the brakes and the seatbelt.
Right,
so like,
right.
what do we do now? And I do feel like when I read the news and when I see different headlines about technology, I feel like we've a little bit got to that point. So for example, when I see, a handful of years ago when Cambridge Analytica hit the headlines, I'm analyzing that from the perspective of what were the dialogues that people saw back when this data was collected. Like I'm trying, I've like mapped out on like a piece of paper, like who made different decisions at what point that led to the culmination of what the Cambridge Analytica was claiming to be. And it's a really slippery conversation. You have like weird claims that are not quite accurate about what the company that acquired the data claimed they were able to do in terms of influencing people's behavior. And they couldn't really do that. And then to me, like at the source of it, you have a team at Facebook that was making decisions about designing their API at the time, which was hugely exciting and also had, I think, some really solid objectives in terms of making Facebook more extensible and usable at the time. And then, looking at 2008 decisions with 2018 eyes,
Right.
Yeah. Mistakes were made, for sure.
And things will continue to evolve really quickly. So I feel like we're always sort of playing catch up. To wrap up the conversation, what would you say to people who, obviously we're not, Elena and I certainly are not experts in this, right? Most people are not that are going to be listening to us. What would you say to them would be a good advice to get some education, to have some understanding of the technology world around them, whether at work, at home, what have you?
Right. My biggest piece of advice is to get curious. So when you are looking at a new piece of technology that feels like slick or sexy or even confusing, and you're starting to see that maybe something isn't quite working, I think the biggest thing is to get curious. So start to ask questions about, like, okay, here's what I'm seeing. And so like my example is like with this, voice assistants that you have in your home. It's like, okay, so I'm standing in my living room and I say, hey Siri or hey Alexa or hey Google, and something happens. It listens to my voice. Like, how does that work? It's like, how could it be that when I say, hey, Siri, it clicks in, but then when I say, I'm just talking with my husband, like, hey, what are we having for dinner? It doesn't.
Or does it?
Or does it, right? And so, like,
Right.
my husband calls me Missy, and every now and then Siri will chime in and be like, yes, David? And we're like, no, okay. But it's like, we're both computer scientists, so we know that it's, it's a bug, basically. It's a problem with the training data, and it sounds like that. But I think, that's to me really important. Just get curious. When you're excited about something, start to wonder, like, how was it made? I guess that's my other thing, too. Like, really think about everything in our lives that's technology. It's fallible. Somebody designed it, somebody constructed it. And so you can question it, and you can kind of interrogate it and ask questions and try to figure out, like, well, what are their goals and what are my goals, and are they the same? I think that's a big one for, like, social media. Like, their goals are to sell advertising and keep me on here as long as possible. And my goals are to talk with my family or connect with the community or maybe go shopping. Right. Are these two things really aligned, and where's there maybe some difference?
Well, something that stuck with me in one of those documentaries I've seen was that when something is free and there doesn't seem to be a product that is being sold to you, then you are the product, right? And you think about that.
Yeah. I think, that's a big one too. So getting into this field of privacy, I came by way of security, and the first stuff I worked on was related to like online scams and phishing attempts, right? Like you get this email that's like, Chase Bank is about to close your account unless you click here and enter your username and password.
Well, they're getting so sophisticated now.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, and it's a super hard problem. And like, to me, I'm like, my basic advice to you is like, start from a place that you know is safe. So you get this email from your bank, call your bank, go in person, go into like where you know is your app or your website, and start from a place that you know is like a legitimate place of safety, as opposed to kind of the equivalent of like somebody running up to you on a street corner and being like, hey, this thing's broken. And you're like, oh my God,
let me go fix it.
Right. Trusting source. Yeah.
No, right. We get those phishing emails, and they've gotten really
They're smart.
Because sometimes I'll get an email, from Cameron, our producer, and it says, hey, blah, 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 blah. But I know it's not real when she uses my first name, which is Bertha.
That's a good tell.
Like, I know that's not Cameron. But anyway.
Well, Maritza, thank you so much for joining us. This is such an interesting conversation. I think we could have talked forever on this topic. There's so much we can dive into. And if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to catch our next one.